I walked into the kitchen and found my dishes in the trash. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and quiet. The kind of morning I usually spent sipping black coffee and reading the local paper. But today, the stainless steel lid of my garbage can was propped open. Inside, nestled among eggshells and coffee grounds, was my entire set of vintage floral plates. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, stood by the island pouring herself a glass of filtered water. She noticed me staring. My daughter-in-law smirked. "They're filthy!" I looked at her perfectly manicured nails, then down at the plates I had scrubbed clean just the night before. She didn't like the pattern. She thought they looked dated. I didn't yell. I didn't cry over the memories tied to that ceramic. I just smiled. Perfect. "Pack your things with them, you won't need my kitchen anymore." She went completely silent. The smirk vanished from her face, replaced by a pale, hard stare. She opened her mouth to argue, probably to remind me that she and my son Leo were my guests and needed patience. But I just turned around, walked to the hallway console, picked up her spare house key, and slipped it into my pocket. "Hey, I need that to get in after work," she snapped, finding her voice. "Then you better be home before I lock the door," I replied calmly, walking back to the kitchen to retrieve my plates. Leo and Sarah had moved into my house 4 months ago. The story was familiar. The rent was too high, they wanted to save for a down payment, and I, a 65-year-old widow living in a 3-bedroom house, surely had enough space. I agreed because he was my son. But I quickly learned that sharing space wasn't about saving money for them. It was about taking over mine. But to understand why I packed her bags that morning, you need to know exactly how we reached that breaking point. The takeover didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, quiet creep of entitlement that started the week they moved in. First, it was my favorite armchair. I came home from grocery shopping to find it shoved into the corner of the garage. In its place in the living room sat a modern, rigid gray sofa they had bought online. "It opens up the space," Sarah explained, tossing a throw pillow onto the cushions. "Your old chair was just a dust trap." I didn't argue. Instead, I quietly dragged my chair straight into my master bedroom and set it by the window. If they wanted a sterile living room, fine, but I wasn't going to let them discard my comfort. Next came the groceries. For the first month, I paid for everything. I didn't mind grabbing extra chicken or milk. But then Sarah started writing lists. Long, specific lists filled with expensive organic produce, imported cheeses, and premium cold-pressed juices. My weekly grocery bill tripled. Leo, always the passive peacekeeper, just shrugged when I brought it up. Mom just let her nest. She's stressed at work, and eating clean helps her relax. "I'm glad she's relaxing," I told him, folding the receipt. But my wallet isn't. I stopped buying anything on her list. The next time I went to the store, I bought exactly what I needed for myself. I cleared a specific shelf in the pantry, placed my items there, and left the rest empty. When Sarah opened the fridge the next morning and found no imported almond milk, she slammed the door shut. "Emily, did you forget the groceries?" she called out. "Nope," I answered from the hallway. "I bought mine. Yours is your responsibility now." I thought cutting off the grocery fund would set a boundary, a clear signal that I was not their personal bank. But Sarah had a different plan for my money. Every month, I kept a white envelope with $300 in cash tucked inside a ceramic jar on the kitchen counter. It was my designated money for the neighborhood boy who mowed the lawn and the handyman who occasionally cleaned my gutters. On a Friday afternoon, the lawnmower hummed outside. I walked to the jar to get the cash, but my fingers hit the bare bottom. The envelope was gone. I found Sarah in the living room unboxing a massive faux fur rug. "Sarah, have you seen the envelope in the kitchen jar?" I asked, keeping my tone level. She didn't even look up from the plastic packaging. "Oh yeah. I used it to pay the delivery guy for this rug. They wouldn't take my card. Don't worry, Leo will pay you back eventually. Eventually, the word hung in the air like a bad joke. She had taken my cash without asking to buy decorations for a house she didn't own. I didn't scream. I didn't demand she return the rug. I simply walked into my home office and logged into my internet provider's portal. I changed the Wi-Fi password. Then, I logged into the streaming services we shared on the living room television and signed out of all devices. That evening, Leo knocked on my door, looking flustered. "Mom, the internet is down. And the TV won't connect. Sarah is trying to watch her show." I looked up from my book. "The internet is fine, Leo." I changed the password. Why? He groaned, rubbing his temples. Because the money I used to pay the internet bill was just spent on a faux fur rug. Until the envelope is replaced, the amenities are suspended. He sighed, digging into his wallet and handing me 3 crisp $100 bills. "Here, just give us the password." I took the money. They thought it was just a petty move over a rug. They didn't realize I was already restructuring the entire household. The tension thickened after the internet incident. Sarah realized I wasn't going to roll over, so she decided to test a different boundary physical space. She decided the guest room they were using didn't get enough morning light. Without asking me, she concluded that my master bedroom, the room I had shared with my late husband, would be much better suited for them. I left for a dental appointment one afternoon. When I returned, I found 3 large cardboard boxes of Sarah's clothes sitting in the hallway right outside my bedroom door. My bedroom door was wide open, and my duvet had been stripped from the bed. Sarah walked out carrying an armful of my sweaters. "Oh, good, you're back. I'm moving our stuff in here. The lighting in the guest room is giving me migraines. I'll put your clothes in the hall closet for now." I looked at my sweaters in her hands. "Put them back. Emily, be reasonable. We are a couple. We need the larger room." "Put them back," I repeated, stepping directly into her path. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. She huffed, dropping the sweaters onto my mattress. She marched downstairs, probably to call Leo and complain. I didn't waste a second. I stepped outside and waved down 2 young men who were finishing a landscaping job at my neighbor's house. I offered them $50 each to move Sarah's boxes right back into the guest room. Once the boxes were back where they belonged, I drove to the hardware store. I bought a heavy-duty keypad lock. By the time Leo and Sarah got home for dinner, my bedroom door was firmly shut, secured by a code only I knew. Sarah glared at the keypad. "This is ridiculous. Are you treating us like criminals?" "I'm treating you like tenants who don't respect closed doors," I stated. The locked door kept my personal space safe, but it couldn't protect the heart of the house, the kitchen. Sarah's retaliation was swift and passive-aggressive. Since she could no longer access my room, she tried to dominate the common areas, specifically the kitchen. She started cooking extravagant meals just for her and Leo, intentionally using up my staple ingredients: flour, olive oil, spices I had grown myself, and leaving the pans crusted with burnt food in the sink. When I asked her to clean up, she would wave a hand. "Let them soak, Emily." I'm exhausted. They soaked for 3 days. I realized my mistake. I was expecting her to respect my property out of basic decency. So I removed the property. I bought a mini fridge and a microwave, placing them quietly in my locked bedroom. I moved my fresh groceries, my favorite coffee, and my good bread behind that keypad. The next evening, Sarah walked into the kitchen to start cooking. I sat at the dining table, eating a quiet meal of roasted chicken and a salad I had prepared in my room. She opened the main refrigerator. It was completely empty. Not a single condiment, not a drop of milk. Even the light was off. "What is going on?" she demanded, turning to me. "Where is the food? Why is the fridge warm?" I unplugged it, I said smoothly, taking a bite of lettuce. Since you're only cooking for yourselves and leaving the mess, I figured you could supply your own appliance power. If you want it plugged back in, add $50 to the utility jar. Leo came downstairs looking absolutely drained. Mom, why are you making this so hard? Can't we just live like a normal family? A normal family cleans their pans? Leo. I wasn't making it hard. I was making it realistic. And Sarah's reaction to the fridge rule triggered the ultimate disrespect the very next morning. That brings us back to the Tuesday morning. The dishes in the trash. Sarah hadn't just thrown them away because she disliked the floral pattern. She threw them away because the night before I had caught her trying to run my dishwasher for a single coffee spoon and a plastic cup. I had stopped the cycle telling her not to waste water on my bill. In her mind, destroying my property was a logical punishment for my boundaries. When I told her to pack her bags, she tried to call my bluff. But seeing me slip her spare key into my pocket made her freeze. I didn't wait for her to apologize. I pulled my vintage plates out of the garbage, carried them to the sink, and began washing them with warm, soapy water. You can't just kick us out. Sarah finally sputtered, her arms crossed tight over her chest. We live here. You stay here, I corrected, without looking away from the sink. There is a difference. And your stay has expired. She scoffed, grabbing her purse. I'm calling Leo. You're being hysterical over some dirty old plates. Call him, I replied, drying a plate with a towel. Tell him to bring boxes. She stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. I finished washing the dishes, dried my hands, and walked to my home office. I booted up my computer and typed out a simple, clear 30-day notice to vacate. No legal jargon, just a straightforward document stating that their month-to-month tenancy was terminated. I had my key back, but Leo was about to come home from work, and I knew exactly how Sarah would spin the story. Leo arrived at 5:30 p.m. He didn't look angry. He looked panicked. Sarah trailed closely behind him, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She had clearly painted a picture of a cruel, unhinged mother who had lost her mind over a few plates. Mom Leo started standing in the hallway. Sarah said you took her key and told us to pack. You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? I walked over to him and handed him a plain manila folder. Open it. He hesitated, then opened the flap. Inside was the 30-day notice completely filled out. Behind it was a spreadsheet I had printed. It detailed the spike in the water bill, the missing $300 cash, the tripled electric bill, and a photo I had snapped of my dishes sitting in the garbage can. Leo stared at the paper. Mom, you're kicking us out. I nodded calmly. You're adults. This arrangement is over. You have 30 days to find an apartment. We're trying to save money, Sarah interjected, her voice shrill. You're supposed to help us. I offered you a roof. I looked directly at her. You decided to treat it like a hotel where you make the rules and throw away the owner's belongings. That's not saving. That's entitlement. Leo rubbed his face. Mom, please. We'll pay more for utilities. We'll buy new plates. I don't want new plates, Leo. I want my house back. He looked at Sarah, then back at me. He tried to puff out his chest, attempting to use his physical presence to intimidate me into backing down. If you force us out, we're leaving tonight. And you won't see us for a long time. He thought I would cave if he packed a bag and bluffed. But I had a surprise waiting for him in the driveway. Fine, I said, stepping aside so they could go upstairs. Pack your things. Leo stopped on the first step, completely disoriented. He had expected me to grab his arm to beg him not to take my future grandchildren away, to apologize for being rigid. When I didn't, he had no choice but to walk upstairs and pull out a suitcase. They packed for 20 minutes, loud enough for me to hear drawers slamming. Then they hauled a single suitcase downstairs and sat on the front porch. They were waiting for me to follow them out and surrender. Instead, I picked up my car keys, walked past them without a word. got into my sedan, and drove away. I went straight to the local hardware store and requested an emergency residential lock change. 30 minutes later, I pulled back into my driveway, followed closely by a white van. Sarah stood up from the porch step as the locksmith hopped out with his tool bag. Panic finally cracked her arrogant facade. "What is he doing? You can't change the locks, we still have stuff inside." "I can, and I am," I said calmly, unlocking the front door for the technician. "You have 30 days to move your belongings. You can arrange a time with me to come pick them up. But you will no longer have free, unchaperoned access to my home." Leo looked at me as if I were a stranger. "You're really doing this? You said you were leaving tonight," I reminded him. "I'm just securing my property." The sound of the new deadbolt clicking into place was the reality check they desperately needed. But Sarah had one last trick up her sleeve. Over the next week, the dynamic shifted entirely. They had crashed on a friend's couch that first night, realizing my bluff was in fact not a bluff at all. When they came back to pack, they had to knock. I opened the door, handed them heavy-duty trash bags, and sat in the hallway with a cup of tea watching them work. The silence in the house was thick. Sarah was fuming angrily, tossing clothes into boxes. Leo just looked exhausted, finally experiencing the stress I had been dealing with for 4 months. On their last trip out, Sarah grabbed the handle of my new expensive vacuum cleaner. "We're taking this. We bought it for the house." I set my teacup down. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded receipt from a month ago, and smoothed it out on the table. My name, my credit card, digits, my purchase. I didn't say a word. I just walked over, took the handle of the vacuum from her grip, and wheeled it backward into my locked bedroom. Leo watched the exchange. For the first time, I saw the fog lift from his eyes. He realized how much Sarah had been manipulating the truth, claiming ownership over things she never earned. He didn't defend her. He just picked up a box of kitchen gadgets and walked out the door. Sarah glared at me one last time. "You're going to be lonely in this big house all by yourself." "Lonely is better than disrespected," I answered. Moving day finally wrapped up. And the silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was the sound of absolute freedom. They left without any emotional goodbyes. Leo looked thoroughly embarrassed as he loaded the last box into his truck. Sarah refused to look at me, keeping her eyes glued to her phone. I stood on the porch, watching the taillights disappear down the street. The next morning, I woke up at 6:00 a.m. I walked into my kitchen and made a pot of black coffee. I opened the cabinet and admired my vintage floral plates, shining and perfectly stacked. Nobody was going to throw them away. Nobody was going to move my chairs. A month passed. I reclaimed my living room, canceled the extra streaming services, and enjoyed the sharp drop in my utility bills. One Sunday afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. It was Leo standing alone, holding a small white envelope. I unlocked the door and stepped out onto the porch, leaving the screen door closed between us. "Hey, Mom," he said, looking at his shoes. I brought this." He held up the envelope. "It's the $300 Sarah took, plus a little extra for the groceries." I opened the screen door just enough to take the envelope. "Thank you, Leo. I appreciate that." He lingered, shifting his weight. "The apartment we found is small. It's been tough. We really miss having the space." It was a subtle probe, a tiny attempt to see if the door was open for a return. I looked at my son, loving him, but knowing my own worth. "Space is expensive." I smiled warmly. "I'm glad you're figuring it out." He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary. "Can I come by sometime?" "Coffee on Sundays at 10, I told him firmly. "That's our relationship now." He smiled, a genuine one this time, and walked back to his car. I went back inside, locked my new deadbolt, and poured myself another cup of coffee. I was Emily Stevens. I was in my own home, and I was finally in charge. Looking back on everything, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about dishes, groceries, or changing locks. It was about realizing the difference between supporting your family and letting them erase you. For a long time, I bought into the idea that being a good mother meant giving endlessly, even if it meant shrinking myself to make room for their entitlement. But the truth is, love isn't a free pass for disrespect. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you're a bad parent or a cold person. It just means you finally value your own peace of mind. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for your grown children is to stop saving them from the real world. And the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to remember that your home should be your sanctuary, not your sacrifice. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect your own peace, I would love to hear your experiences in the comments below. How did you handle it? If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more real-life stories about finding your strength-setting boundaries and taking back control of your life, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and don't be afraid to protect your peace. See you in the next video.